Okay, good morning, everybody. So we are back. We are continuing Masechet Makkot, Daf Kaf Aleph Amud Bet. Let's go back to the Mishnah for a moment, the Mishnah that we saw last time. We won't see the whole Mishnah, but just from Kaf Aleph Amud Bet at the top of the page, the Mishnah gave us this case whereby via one action, one could be liable for 8 sets of Malkot. We're going to see the Gemara is going to go through maybe. Why is it only 8? Maybe there's a lot more. But that's to start off. So the Mishnah said, right? So at the top of Kaf Aleph Amud Bet, the first word on the page, it says Yesh Holesh Telem Echad v'chayav alav mishum shmone lavim. You can have a scenario whereby a person plows in a field, right? With one action, they're actually chayav for 8 different malkot, 8 different isurim, 8 different lavim. So what are the 8? Obviously, it wouldn't happen every time that a person would plow, but this is the scenario which we can imagine. So number 1, hacholesh b'shor v'chamo. I was going to say yachdav. That's what the pasuk says. The person is plowing with a donkey and an ox together. This is kilei behema. You cannot plow with those 2 animals together, right? One of the reasons Mepharshim explained might be because it's sar balei chayim, because they have different ways. But in any event, that is an explicit prohibition in the Torah of plowing shor v'chamo yachdav. So that is 1. Number 2, vein mukdashin, that these animals are actually hekdesh, meaning you're not allowed to work with them. So that would be number 2 and 3, because both the shor and the chamor, the assumption here is that each one is makudash, that each one is a firstborn, it would be forbidden to work. So that is going to be 3 lavim. Number 4, which the Gemara is going to focus on in a little bit more depth, is the kilayim bakerem, right? We have kilayim, meaning forbidden mixture of different plant species, which you cannot plant together. Now the person here is plowing, the person is not planting. So what is the prohibition of kilayim? We'll get back to that in a moment, because that's what the Gemara is going to discuss in detail. But essentially, prohibition number 4 is in terms of kilayim bakerem. You can have vegetables and grapes together in the vineyard. Okay, number 5. Ubashvit, number 6, Vayom Tov, that this plowing took place at a time when one was forbidden to plow, both in the Shemitah, or one of the primary malachot, which one cannot do in the Shemitah year, is plowing, and so too on Yom Tov. Harisha is also forbidden, a forbidden malacha on Yom Tov, right? It is not one of the malachot which is going to be permitted for the sake of Achal Nefesh. That is only those malachot which are much closer to the preparation of the food. This is too far removed, and therefore that is not that is forbidden on Yom Tov as well. So we're up to 6. Number 7 and 8, we say v'kohen v'nazir b'beit hatumah, that the plowing takes place in a field where there is a corpse, and the person who is plowing is both a kohen who cannot come into contact with tumah, with the dead body, and he's also a nazir, and therefore that is going to be forbidden. So those are the 8 lavim in one go. And then the Mishnah said, Chananya ben Chachinai Chananya ben Chachinai said, if the person was wearing kilayim at the same time, so then that would be a 9th one. So Mula Eino Hashem. They said to him, that's got nothing to do with this. Everything we're talking about is the Maaseh Harisha. That there are 8, right? There are many ways that a person could transgress, right? He could be eating a non-kosher sandwich at the same time, but that's got nothing to do with the fact that he is plowing in that act of harisha. There are 8 lavim, and that one would not count. Amalem afa nazir lo Hashem. So he answers back, well, the fact that he's a nazir has got nothing to do with the fact that he's plowing either. So that's the machloket between them. Okay, so we're now in the Gemara. We saw, let's just go through it quickly. We saw this already, but let's read it again. So it says, is everyone still there? Yeah, just disappeared off my screen for a moment. Okay, so it says the Gemara over here. We have it in brackets. There's a little bit of a correction in the Masoret Hashas. It says, Amar of Bibi, Amar Avasi, lo poshet velovesh mamash. Okay, so this is actually going on the previous section in the Mishnah. If you go back just for a moment, so the previous part of the Mishnah told us, here we're talking about the case where in one action, a person gets 8 different lavim. But before, the Mishnah was discussing different cases whereby a person does a continuous lav, and would get a number of malkot for that. So the last case it said was, the example was, second last line at the bottom of Amud Aleph, it said, Ayalovesh kilayim kol hayom, eino chayav el achat. A person's wearing kilayim, a person's wearing shatnez, they would only be chayav for one set of Makkot. However, Amrulo al tilbash, if they were set on separate occasions in that day when they were given different hatra'ah, and each time they were told al tilbash, v'hu poshet v'lovesh, and he took it off and he put it on again. So that is a new action that would be chayav al kol achat v'achat. So now says the Gemara over here, does it mean each time that he actually took the garment off and put it back on? So said Rabbi in the name of Ashi, said lo poshet v'lovesh mamash, not that he has to take it off and put it on each time after each hatra'ah. Rather, even if he just taken his arm out of the sleeve and he put it back on, that is considered a new wearing of the garment after that hatra'ah, and that would be enough to get Makkot. That was opinion number one. Then said the Gemara, Machver of Acha, Rav Ika, Ayule V'afuke. Right? Rav Acha would demonstrate the way this is. They were giving the shiur, and he would show them what does it mean, Lovesh v'poshet. Actually, no, it means to take it off and put it back on. So he says, no, it's not enough just to get Makkot, just to have the arm out of the sleeve, but it's actually somebody who takes off the entire garment. And the third opinion, which is the most stringent, from Ashi Omer, Afidu lo shaha ela kadei lifshot v'levosh chayav. Rav Ashi says, no, each time after there is a new hatra'ah, not that a person actually physically takes off the garment and puts it back on, but if enough time passes that he could have taken it off and put it back on, that is considered as part of that, and that is a new lav that he has transgressed. Okay, so that is the first section of the Gemara. Now the two dots says yesh horesh telem echad v'chuli. So we go back to the case of the Sefer, which we started off talking about today. So Amar Rabbi Yanai b'chabura nimnu v'gamru hachofeh b'kilayim loke. So Rabbi Yanai says the following halacha. When the Chachamim came together, b'chavura, they came together to discuss this halacha. Nimnu v'gamru. They established this, what's called a davar shebeminyan, meaning when the Chachamim got together and they established the halacha in such a way. We know, by the way, the din is that a davar shebeminyan cannot be. You need another minyan acher in order to in order to change that. So that is a halacha which was established by the Sanhedrin, and we find this with many examples of this. Even if there's a certain takana and the reason for it no longer applies nowadays, nonetheless, if it's a davar shebeminyan, the reason may no longer apply, but the takana still stands, and we don't have the authority to go and undo that takana. So this was a davar shebeminyan imnu v'gamru, and they said hachofeh b'kilayim lokeh. They established the halacha follows the opinion that hachofeh b'kilayim, that somebody who is covering up, right? You have kilayim on the ground. The point is you can't plant. You may not plant these forbidden species next to each other, but if they are there on the ground and you just cover them up with dirt, that's what's called chofeh. That is considered as if you planted them, and therefore that is going to be one is going to get Makkot for that. So Rabbi Yanai says we established that this is the halacha. So Amalahen, or it should probably be Amalei, right? But Amalei Rabbi Yochanan, Lav Mishnatenu Isa. Rabbi Yochanan says, I don't understand, Rabbi Yanai, what are you talking about? You are saying that in Chavura Nimnu v'Gamru, well, this halacha is obvious. We already have it in our Mishnah, right? Where do we see it in our Mishnah? Yesh chalosh telem echad v'chayav alav, mishum shmone lav v'nachlosh b'shov v'chamo, v'en mukdashim v'kilayim b'kerem. Right, we said that you could plow in the scenario of plowing, you're going to be chayav for 8 different lavim. The fourth one was kilayim b'kerem. Now, how do you understand what exactly is the case? You're not planting, you're plowing. So your ox and your donkey are plowing. How are they therefore planting kilayim b'kerem? It must be, right? He says, "Ay cholesh," one who is plowing. D'mechayev mishum kilayim hechi mishkachad le. How is the one who is engaged in plowing now going to be chayav for kilayim? What is the case? Surely it must be that they cover it up as they go. As they are plowing, they're moving the dirt and it's covering up it's covering up the kilayim. So that is the case. That is what Rabbi Yochanan says. So listen to the answer. Rabbi Yana, he says, Amarle ilav didalai lachaspa mi mashkachat marganita. So this is an expression. He says, if I had not lifted up for you the chaspa, if I had not lifted up the shards, right, the piece of clay, mi mashkachat marganita tute, who would have found the jewel that is hiding underneath? In other words, he's saying, yes, once you know this halacha, so now it's obvious to you that this is what the Mishnah was talking about. But when the Mishnah just said kilayim bakerem, there are more than one conceivable way that you could be chayav for kilayim bakerem there. Once we've learned the halacha that achofer bekilayim lokeh, that when you cover up with the dirt over the kilayim, and that's going to be as if you've planted. So now it's obvious. Now you can look back at the Mishnah and you can see. But it's like a hidden jewel, and it was covered up with a piece of rock or a piece of clay. And I've lifted it up for you, and I've revealed the jewel. But now you understand. That's what the Mishnah is talking about. So how else could you have understood the Mishnah, right? Why is it that only after he said that do we say that it's clear? So Amar le Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Now about halfway down the page, a little bit past. Reish Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, "Ilav the kilsach gaval Abba." So he says, were it not that a great man had said this, right? The great man over here, being Rabbi Yanai, who had taught this halacha, and he told him that this is the understanding of the Mishnah. He said, had Rabbi Yanai, this great man, not praised you in this way, I would have learned the Mishnah differently. Meaning, once he said it, he understands that's the meaning of that's the pshat of the Mishnah. But he loved the kilsach kabar Rabba, I would have said the following. Matinitin mani, who does our Mishnah follow? Whose opinion is it? It's Rabbi Akiva. Damar matinitin mani Rabbi Akiva. Damar makayem kilayim lokeh. The Rabbi Akiva says that when it comes to kilayim, it's a little bit stringent. It's not only that if you plant kilayim, you would get Makkot, but even for leaving the kilayim that had been there, that had been planted, and you have an obligation to uproot them. And by not uprooting them, by guarding them, by protecting them, by allowing them to stand, you would get Makkot for that. So therefore, when the Mishnah says kilayim kerem, it means you've got kilayim bakerem, you've got the shor and chamor that are plowing in this field, and there are kilayim there, and by virtue of the fact that you're there and you're plowing and you're not uprooting these kilayim kerem, you would get Makkot for that. That, says Rabbi Yochanan, says Reish Lakish, is how we could have understood the Mishnah, and not been for the thing that we've just learned. We could have understood it in that way, like Rabbi Akiva. Now the question is, where does Rabbi Akiva say that amakayem kilayim lokeh? That's what the Gemara now needs to address. So again, Ilav Amar Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan, Ilav the kilsach gaval Abba. Had this great man not praised you, had Rabbi Yanai not told you that this understanding of the Mishnah was correct, I would have said Matnitin mani Rabbi Akiva, that the Mishnah actually follows Rabbi Akiva. The Amar Hamakayem kilayim lokeh, who says that if you fail to uproot, right, if you maintain, that's the word, maintain the kilayim, you would get Makkot. So my Rabbi Akiva, where does Rabbi Akiva say such a thing? Titania, as we learn in a Braita, Hamenachesh v'amechafer bekilayim lokeh. So somebody who menachesh is like weeding, right? You're weeding out the bad weeds in order to allow the plants to grow better. So that's similar to Zorea. V'amechafer bekilayim, and somebody who's covering up the kilayim with dirt, right? Lokeh. In those cases you get Makkot. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Akiva adds on, he says not just that, but even one who not plants or improves the planting, but even one who maintains the kilayim. So my time of Rabbi Akiva, where does he get it from? What is Rabbi Akiva's reasoning for saying so? Titania, Sadcha lo tizra kilayim. The pasuk says, right? Sadcha lo tizra kilayim. Don't plant kilayim, forbidden mixtures in your field. The entire pasuk, if you have it on the side, it's in Parashat Kedoshim. Vayikra Yutet. It's Chukotai Tishmolu Don't create kilayim, don't crossbreed animals. Your field, do not plant forbidden mixtures of species. And also kilay. So this pasuk has got all three. It's got kilay be'emad, it's got kilay hakerem, and it's got kilay ha-beged, forbidden mixtures of shatnez in the garment. But so from the fact that the pasuk says sad chalot is kilayim, eini el hazoreh, it says don't plant kilayim. So from there I only know from there I only know that you cannot plant. Mekayem minayin, but what about maintaining it? Where do I learn that from? So when you read the whole pasuk, again it says ben zachalot abia kilayim. So chalot is like kilayim or beged kilayim shatnez. So the word kilayim actually appears 3 times in the pasuk, 3 different contexts. But if you read it the following way, it comes out. It says Talmud Lamar kilayim sadcha lo. In other words, right, kilayim sadcha lo. The pshat is sadcha lo tizra kilayim. But you could read it. The fact that it says kilayim sadcha lo, meaning don't allow kilayim in your field at all. Don't allow kilayim in your field at all, and therefore you cannot maintain it. That is Rabbi Akiva's limud, to say that you cannot maintain the kilayim. Okay, even though that is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, and we've said we could have learned the Mishnah that way, but now we've learned that it's about achofer b'kilayim. That's what, covering them up with dirt. That is what it's talking about. And the discussion we saw between Rabbi Yanai and Rabbi Yochanan, whether we would have known whether that was obvious from the Mishnah or we needed the limit of Rabbi Yanai first in order to reveal that was actually the pshat of the Mishnah all along. So now the Gemara is going to ask, there are a number of other cases. First of all, there are a number of other Makkot, which we might have expected the Mishnah to have included, to have mentioned already. And then we're going to discuss a number of different scenarios whereby you could add, hypothetically, you could add what you said, that with one action you could get 8 Makkot. So it's like, well, I'll show you more. You can get 9, you can get 10, you can get maybe 15. We'll go through and see how it does that. So now says the Gemara, wait a minute. Amar le ula Rav Nachman. We are 4 lines from the bottom of the wide lines. Amar le ula Rav Nachman. Velilke nami mishum zorea beyom tov. Right? If you're saying that the reason that, again, our Mishnah talks about the case of charisha, of plowing, but one of the 8 lavim that we said was because of kilayim bakerim. If you're saying that the prohibition of kilayim bakerim is the fact that when you're plowing, the animals are moving the dirt and they're covering up the kilayim, and we said that when you cover that up, that is equivalent to planting, that is equivalent to zorea, and one would get and one would get Makkot for that. So why don't we say, add on here an extra love for the fact that you are planting, right? Lilke nami mishum zorea b'yom tov. Since we've already established it, that is one of the says the Rivan over here, sort of in the middle, about 6 lines from the bottom. In the middle of the line says Lilke nami mishum zorea da'anim nuva gamru d'mechaper zorea who kedamran, because we've established halacha that in this case one is going to get Makkot for mechaper, that is considered like zorea, that covering the dirt up is like planting. So why don't we include that as an extra love? Answer number 1, says the Gemara over here. So okay, the answer is, the first answer at least is ein achinami. There would actually be an additional lav over here. It's not just 8, it's 9, maybe it's more. But we say Tana v'sher. Tana v'sher is something we find that sometimes the Mishnah or the Tana, in whatever case, will list a number of different cases, a number of examples, a number of different categories. It's not an exhaustive list, it just has some of them. So that's what he's saying. He's saying, really, yeah, this was 8. This is just to show you that there could be lots of different lavim going on at the same time, but it's not actually an exhaustive list, meaning there are others, like Zorea b'yom tov. So here the Gemara says, wait a minute. Amale Tana v'shir, Amale Tana Ktani Shmone, v'at amar Tana v'shir. Okay, you can tell me that it's not an exhaustive list where you just start giving examples. But when you're very, very specific about the numbers, like over here, you say there are 8. If it had said, one can do one can perform one action and can get multiple sets of and can transgress multiple lavim, can get multiple sets of Makkot for that. How so? And then it says, okay, so then we could say Tanav Shiur, but it's very specific. It says there are 8 lavim here. You're telling me that it said 8, but it actually meant 9, it actually meant 10. Then why does it say 8? It doesn't make sense, right? Amale Tanak Tani Shmone, Ve'atama Tanav Shiur. So the Gemara does not like that answer. That is answer number 1. So our question remains in place. Answer number 2, Amar Rava. Yesh chiluk melachot b'Shabbat, ve'en chiluk melachot b'Yom Tov. Okay, so this is answer number 2, which is to say, we know if we were to say how many different melachot are there. So melachot Shabbat, we know that there are lamed tet melachot Shabbat, there are 39 melachot, and we say that regarding Shabbat, according to everybody, there is chiluk melachot. What does chiluk melachot mean? It means that if in one action you performed a number of, with one hatra and one halem, what we say, you performed a number of different melachot, you would have a different chiyuv for each one of those melachot that you had performed. Right? Each melacha is separate on Shabbat. However, when it comes to Yom Tov, it's not so clear. When it comes to Yom Tov, it may be that we don't say there is a chiluk melachot, meaning I'm not chayav for planting and plowing, etc. on Yom Tov. I'm chayav for breaking Yom Tov. And that is when, even if a person has done in one lapse of consciousness, right, has performed a number of different melachot of Yom Tov, nonetheless, that does not count as separate actions, that counts as one. Let's have a look at the Rivan over here. He says, Ein chiluk melachot b'Yom Tov. It says, Im asa shtayim v'shalosh melachot v'helem echad. Right? Helem echad means, right, at one point you forgot that it was Shabbat, or you started doing the melachot. When you remembered, and then you did it again, so that would be another helem. The word helem comes from the root to disappear, but it's one, right, lapse of memory, whatever it is. So he says, you did 2 or 3 melachot in one go. You planted, you plowed, you rode, whatever it is. Or or you did one melacha, meaning one action, which includes multiple melachot, like in our case. It says on Yom Tov, if we say Ein chiluk melachot b'Yom Tov, on Yom Tov you'd only be chayav once. It would only be considered one love. Ela lemad amar havara lechalek yatzat. Sorry, Ein chayav ela achat. Lemad amar havara lechalek yatzat. Sfir aleh Ein chiluk melachot b'Yom Tov. So this is a machloket we have in the Gemara on Shabbat. Basically, where this is learned out from the Psukim is that we know the Lamatet Melachot are not all listed in the Torah, right? It's learned out by juxtaposition to the construction of the Mishkan. We're told to keep Shabbat a number of places. The one Melacha which is mentioned specifically is Havara, is lighting a fire. So there's a machloket in the Gemara over there. Why was Havara singled out? Why was this one Melacha singled out by itself on Shabbat? So one opinion is that Havara lechalek yatsa. In other words, the fact that one melacha is singled out and it separates. Therefore, we have chiluk melachot that is on Shabbat, but that is not the case on Yom Tov. So, according to that opinion, that's what we're saying over here. Havara lechalek yatsa tzfir le'ein chiluk melachot b'Yom Tov. To the Yom Tov lo yatzat Havara. Right? Havara, in fact, is Havara is permitted on Yom Tov. We know that really midoraita on a doraita level, if one was to light a flame on Yom Tov, that would not be a prohibition, a biblical prohibition. Rabbanan said that you cannot light a new flame on Yom Tov. You can only light from an existing flame, but you can, for example, to light candles, or if one needs a fire to cook or whatever it is. So to light on Yom Tov, which is not Shabbat, on Yom Tov, which is not Shabbat, from a pre-existing flame, that is permitted. And by the way, this idea that fire itself is not an isur deoraita on Yom Tov, so it comes up in many contexts. A very, very practical halacha. You know, when you think about things like electricity, the truth is that when electricity was first invented, discovered, and the poskim began to discuss it, there were a number of poskim who allowed turning on electricity on Yom Tov. A number of these Sephardi poskim, particularly, it may be that that there was, we see it in some of the Ashkenazi poskim as well. We see in some of the early works that are written about this, it's not clear if there was really a sufficient understanding of the technology, and things changed as well. Nowadays, the generally accepted psak is that one would not turn on electricity on Shabbat, but certainly not on Shabbat, but not even on Yom Tov. But if we say that lighting fire is an isur d'Rabbanan, so again, generally speaking, electricity nowadays is not going to be the melacha of hav'ara. A lot of people think there's a misconception that if you turn on anything electric, you turn on air conditioning, you turn on use a cell phone, whatever it is, that the sur melacha is hav'ara. That is not correct. What is it on Shabbat? There's a whole long discussion. It might be connected to boneh, it might be connected to makeh b'patish, it might be connected to molid, which is an isur d'Rabbanan. But going back, if you have an electric device with a heating element, something, a piece of metal that gets red hot, that would be an isur of hav'ara. So, for example, the incandescent light bulbs, which you don't really have today anymore. Nowadays, everybody uses LEDs. But an incandescent light bulb was an example. That would have been an isur of hav'ara. So too, if you have a hot plate, right, that would be an isur of hav'ara to operate it. So on Yom Tov, let's say your lights were to go off, or your hot plate was to go off, or something like that. So on Shabbat, to turn it back on would be an isur d'oraita, and even to ask a non-Jew to do it in the laws of Amiral and Ochri. We know that to ask a non-Jew to perform a melacha d'oraita on Shabbat or on Yom Tov is very, very problematic. If to ask just under normal circumstances, to ask to perform an isur d'Rabbanan would be forbidden as well. But there are certain exceptions. There are ma'arites that when we have a shvut to shvut b'makom mitzvah, a shvut to shvut meaning a double d'Rabbanan. So Amiral and Ochri asking a non-Jew to perform something on Shabbat or on Yom Tov, that is an isur d'Rabbanan. If one is asking them to perform an isur d'Rabbanan, right, it's an isur d'Rabbanan to ask the non-Jew, and that which I'm asking them to do, if I was doing it, would be an isur d'Rabbanan. So that is shvut to shvut. So shvut to shvut is still prohibited, but if it's in a place of a mitzvah, or it is in a place of a letzorech rabim, right, where the community needs it, then it would be allowed. So you have certain cases. So on Yom Tov, let's say if your platter went off or something like that, and you need to ask a non-Jew to plug it in order to heat up the food. So there it's only going to be an isur d'Rabbanan. So it's shvut to shvut, b'makom mitzvah, and therefore it's going to be much easier. In that case, there's much more room to be lenient on Yom Tov for this to happen than on Shabbat, based on the fact that hav'ara is a melacha is going to be isur d'Rabbanan on Yom Tov rather than on Shabbat. So in any event, we see that there's an opinion that says there's chiluk melachot on Shabbat. There's not melachot on chiluk melachot on Yom Tov. So going back into the Gemara, so that is why, even though in this case you might say the person is plowing on Yom Tov and is planting on Yom Tov because they're covering up the dirt, of the kilayim. Nonetheless, it's still only considered 8 lavim because one of the lavim is Yom Tov, and not we don't differentiate it into the two different cases. Right, that was what. So Amar Rava, yesh chiluk melachot b'Shabbat, ein chiluk melachot b'Yom Tov. Amar le adatei, says to him, yes, let it stand. That is very good. That is correct. So now, Eitivei Abaye. Now we're going to get into a little bit of a discussion whether we do say chiluk melachot on Yom Tov or not. So Eitivei Abaye. Abaye challenges. It says ein chiluk melachot b'Yom Tov. It says, really, is that correct that we don't say chiluk melachot on Yom Tov? V'atnan, we have the following case, right? We have the following. It says here v'atnan, but the Masoret Hashas corrected to v'atanya, that it should be. We have the following braita: hamavashel gid b'chalav. A bit confusing because the word, again, there's no vowels. So sometimes it could be chalav or it could be chaylev, but over here it's chalav, which is milk, as opposed to chaylev, which are forbidden fats, which are pieces of meat. But hamavashel gid, so one is cooking the gid. The understanding here is gid anashe, which is which itself is forbidden to eat. And vashel gid b'chalav b'yom tov v'achlo. So somebody who cooked this gid on Yom Tov and then ate it, lokech chamesh, is going to be chayav for 5 different lavim. He's going to get 5 sets of Makkot. Why 5? Lokeh mishum ochel gid. So 1 is for eating the gid, right, which is, it's a forbidden part of the animal to eat. And then getting Makkot for cooking on Yom Tov for where it is not, where there is no need, right? We said that bishul on Yom Tov is permitted, but that's only where it is for a tzorach Yom Tov, to cook. For example, if one was to cook on Yom Tov, for the sake, we discussed this recently, for the sake of chol, for the sake of not to eat it on Yom Tov, but to eat it the next day, that is completely forbidden. If one was to cook on Yom Tov, not for human consumption, right, but to cook for one's animals, that would also be forbidden. One was just to cook because, I enjoy cooking. It's what I do in my spare time. I'm not actually going to, I don't actually want to eat. I'm, practicing for MasterChef, whatever it is, that would be forbidden. That is not L'tzorech Yom Tov. So the gid, again, so the truth is that the gid is a part of the, is part of the animal, which doesn't really have a taste. And therefore, one's cooking the gid anashe or whatever it is, it's forbidden to eat. So therefore, there's no actual need to cook it. So therefore, one is going to be chayav for eating it. One's going to be chayav for cooking it as well. Right? More than, furthermore, one's going to get Makkot for also cooking the gid, which is meat, and cooking it with milk. You cannot cook meat and milk together. You're also going to get Makkot for eating basar b'chalav. Okay, so we're up to 4. And finally, lokem mishom hav'ara. Okay, and one is also going to get Makkot for lighting the fire, turning on hadlakata esh, lighting on the fire that is under the pot. And also, in the same way that we said that you can't cook for no reason, you also can't light the fire on Yom Tov for no reason. So what do we see? We saw 5 Makkot in the section. Remember, Abaye brings this as a proof that we do say chiluk melachot on Yom Tov. So we said you're getting a Makkot, one for cooking basar b'chalav and one for eating basar b'chalav, one for cooking gid anashe and one for eating gid anashe, and one for lighting the fire. So cooking basar b'chalav, that's going to be in Isur whenever you do it. Doesn't matter if it's Yom Tov, Shabbos, Yom Kippur, or just Tuesday. That is always forbidden. But we said there's one set of one Makkot for bishul b'Yom Tov shelo l'tzorech, and one for havara b'Yom Tov shelo l'tzorech. In other words, 2 different lavim, 2 different Makkot for 2 different melachot on Yom Tov. But you said to me that there's no chiluk melachot on Yom Tov. If we go according to the way we understood our Mishnah, that does not differentiate between plowing and planting on Yom Tov, because it's all just Isur Yom Tov. So too, in this Braita, which gives us 5 lavim, it should really only be 4, because it shouldn't differentiate between cooking and lighting the fire. It should just be Yom Tov. And that's what Abaye says. Right now, at the top of Daf Kaf Bet Amud Aleph, he says, "Ve'im ita." If it's true, if it's correct that in fact there is no chiluk melachot on Yom Tov, so mishum havara lo mechayev. Don't say that there is a separate chiyuv because of havara, because of a separate melacha on Yom Tov. You've already said he's chayev because of the cooking, so it shouldn't be. Right? In other words, he's already chayev for Yom Tov. It shouldn't be 2 separate ones. So says the Gemara, okay, fine, we accept that. It says, Apik havara v'ayil gid anashe shel nevela. It says, okay, it's still 5, but we're going to change it now. We're not going to say a separate 5th chiyuv because of havara, but rather the case is, so take out apik havara, take out havara, v'ayil, and bring in the case of gid hanashe shel nevela. This was not just an ordinary gid hanashe. This was a gid hanashe of a nevela, of an animal which may be a kosher species, or is a kosher species, because I'll explain why in a moment. But of a nevela, which is an animal that has not undergone shchita, the animal has died or whatever way, has not undergone shchita, and that is prohibited to eat. Okay, if it had been a non-kosher species, by the way, regarding basar b'chalav, so basar b'chalav, we understand that is only. That is a prohibition where it is a kosher species of animal. If you had a non-kosher species, you definitely can't eat it. Okay, but that is basar b'chalav would probably not apply over there. Okay, so then we say like this. We say apik havara v'ayil gid anashe shel nevela. V'atani Rabbi Chia, but the problem with that is this. Atani Rabbi Chia. Lokesh taim al achilato v'shalosh al bishalo. Right? Rabbi Chia phrased this in a slightly different way. The same case where we just said that there are five sets of Makkot. Rabbi Chia said, two for eating it, and 3 for cooking it. So we understand the way that we phrased it originally was 2 for eating it, meaning 1 for eating basar b'chalav, right, and 1 for eating gid hanashe, and 3 for cooking it in terms of lighting the fire, in terms of cooking on Yom Tov and cooking basar b'chalav. But now we're saying that it's not because of lighting the fire; it's because of the fact that it was a gid hanashe shanavela. In other words, the 5th one that we're adding on is for eating the gid hanashe shanavela. So it should be 3 for eating and 2 for cooking. So Atani Rabbi Chia lokesh 2 al achilato v'shalosh bishalo. The eat, but if it's true, what we've just said, if it's correct that it's actually gid hanashe shanavela, he should have said shalosh al achilato, right? That it's 3 on the eating, so it can't be that. So no. So it says the Gemara, okay. So we'll change it again, so that it was still 2 on eating and 3 on cooking. Ela apik havara. So take out the case of havara and don't say that it's a case of gid hanashe of an avela. Rather, ayil atzei asher. Right? You were cooking it with the firewood that you used was from an eitz asherah, was from a tree that was planted, a tree that was designated for. Or that was used for avodah zarah, and you cannot get any benefit from the avodah zarah. You cannot use that tree. You cannot use it as firewood either, and that is the wood that was used, and that is going to be therefore the fifth chiyuv in this case. What is the azhara for cooking and using from this wood, this asherah wood? And from the following pasuk, v'lo yidbak beyadcha. Right, this is the pasuk Dvarim Yud Gimel Yud Chet. V'lo yidbak biyadcha me'uma min ha'chelem. Meaning none of it should be in your hands. Essentially, this is referring to that which was used for avodah zarah. You cannot have it. You cannot own it. You cannot derive any sort of benefit from it. So if that's the case, that we are using this, that they were saying that the wood had come from an eitz asherah. Amalei Rav Acha Breder Rava le Rav Ashi. Rav Acha, the son of Rava, answers back to Rav Ashi. He says, in that case, but there should be another chiyuv here. Belil keinami mishum lo tavi to'ava el beitecha. Right, if you're saying that it's coming from the wood of the asherah, just bringing that wood into your home, that and having possession of it, that already is a lav. So therefore, it should be 6. So he says no. And rather, what is the case? What are we dealing with? He says it's not that you cooked it not that you used firewood from avodah zarah. Completely the opposite. You used firewood from hekdesh, from wood which had been dedicated to the Beit HaMikdash, and that you're not allowed to use. We know for that is from the following pasuk. Their asherah trees, the trees of the wood which has been used for avodah zarah, that needs to be burnt in fire. Don't do the same to that which is of Hashem your God. In other words, that which has been designated for hekdesh, that you may not burn. The wood for avodah zarah you have to destroy, you have to burn it. But that which is not, you cannot do that. Lo tasun ken Hashem Elokechem. This is also the principle Lo tasun ken Hashem Elokechem. From here we derive the prohibition of destroying Hashem's name and the requirement for Kniza and all sorts of things like that. Okay, so that is the conclusion over there, and therefore we are left. And there are still 5 lavim, and it's still possible to say that there's only 1 for Yom Tov, and therefore we say Ein Chiluk Melachot BeYom Tov. Okay, Ad Kan, and we'll pick up from 2 dots tomorrow. Everybody have a great day.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. Hope to.